we're back.
Oh, okay.
And our Brady Bunch thing rearranged.
Yes, oh my gosh, Amy, you just sounded like Mrs. Doubtfire. Do that hello again. Hello!
Hello!
Okay, so you want to hear what just happened, by the way?
What just happened?
Quiet. I've never had this happen before. My phone said it was too hot, and it just froze.
Oh.
But like, I've never had that happen before.
What kind of phone do you have?
Just an iPhone, you know, like a regular, normal, whatever,
That's
something.
So weird.
Okay, anyway, okay, I'm going to be quiet. What were you all saying now?
I don't know.
I actually, that's happened to my phone, not during a live, but I always compare that to like our own self-care, that sometimes you just like, it just gets to this point where it's just like a total shutdown.
You are a therapist.
I
love it.
My brain operates in analogies. It's just like a weird thing about me.
Because I also think like, I also think
weird, I say cool.
I'm owning my weirdness. Part of my adult puberty is owning my weirdness.
My favorite line, by the way, adult puberty.
We need to save that in 12.
Today, you've become a woman. We should wear awkward bat mitzvah dresses. I'm very into the whole bat mitzvah culture, and I think we should celebrate our adult puberty.
But like, it needs to happen.
Well, I am still in regular puberty because I'm a single girl. So, I'm not
actually
there.
Okay.
Which that leads us so perfectly to a great topic, which we had talking about how basically that the way our community can talk about people who don't have a partner can feel really demoralizing. And also, I think because of the way some people speak about those who are in the dating world or divorced or single, whatever it might be, I think even just being around that talk for some people is a deterrent from going to shul or being out in public. Or even just, I find that this is actually very common, that people will bump into someone they haven't seen in a while who is single, and they'll be catching up with them. And then they'll also be asking like, and what are your friends up to? Is she also still single? Oh, and so, did she ever find someone? Oh, she's such a great girl. And, and she's so skinny. I don't understand. Why is she, right? And it's like,
good. She looks good.
Right? And so then you're standing there and you're like, okay, so like, it's bad enough that you instituted a Q&A, but now we're having like a Q&A about my whole high school yearbook. Like, why? Like, what?
My mother does that. She'll be like, okay, how many girls are left in your class that are still single? I think she's
your mom is on here. You're not allowed.
Are you calling out your mom?
Nice.
You're calling out your mom?
Yes. She hasn't done it in a few years because we're down to like 3. Yeah, 3. My mom.
Shove a piece of herring into that yenta smell. Actually, do you know that when Khani and I, should I tell them what happened, Khani, when we did a live?
Ima, can Rachel say the story?
I'm not going to give the details.
Okay, don't say the details, but pretty much.
But basically, like, we did a live, and so we kept posting stuff, like, the whole time. And afterwards, I texted Khani, and I'm like, how about that troll? And she's like, who? And I'm like, whatever. She's like, that's my mom. We literally have like a voice note of me just like howling with laughter, like howling. And it was at 2 a.m. So it was like even funnier, but it was funny in the morning also.
That's really funny. Like even
so,
class.
I always say like it's hilarious in the middle of the night, but then the real test is like when we wake up in the morning, like, is this still funny? And it's still funny. But anyway, back to what we were saying before, can we talk for a few minutes about the language piece, about the way people talk about those who are dating, the way it comes up in conversation, why it is that so many people who are single feel like when people talk to them, they feel very small. And they could have been feeling really good about themselves and just they feel very small. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the language that is used to refer to single people is not speaking about them as if they were people and adults, right? We say either we refer to as single girls and boys, regardless of how old we are. We just never become an adult.
Right.
And it's not that. Right. right? And if not that, then it's just singles. Like I don't think that anyone else, correct me if I'm wrong, like I don't think anyone else refers to people as like the marrieds, the divorced. Like it's just like the singles. What are we gonna do for the singles? We're not even people. We're either children or we can't even be called an adult. And I think it's just very, very patronizing, demoralizing, disrespectful, and it plays into how we're also treated.
Yeah. Yael, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I was like thinking my thought. I think obviously I can only really speak for divorced people. I think that it's a major problem because obviously they don't have like the divorced and they don't have, but they still feel like they're not, because they're not part of a unit anymore, they're less than, they're like half now, as opposed to
they feel like they got demoted.
Yeah, they got demoted. They weren't singles anymore. They weren't a single girl or a single boy. They were then married, and they got the respect of the community because they're married.
They were sitting in the VIP.
Right.
The VIP section.
Right. You're not in the VIP anymore. You're just a lowly, case, pathetic, divorced person who, what happened? I don't understand. They were such a gorgeous couple. I don't get it. And it's very painful.
Something I find often for people who are divorced, if they have children, people will actually say to them, well, at least you have kids.
Oh, people
right?
used to me. By the way, little did they know I had secondary infertility. So it really killed me.
Right.
But so that was one thing. And then the second thing, I feel like that's our level of singles, Amir Tashem by you. I think that's on the same levels. Like, at least you have a kid. Like, and great. So now I have to co-parent with an asshole. Like, I don't get it.
Right.
Like, what is that? What does that mean? It's so upsetting and unnerving. Even now, I'm like flat. Like, I'm getting triggered.
Right. Well, often, it's like any sentence that starts off with the words "at least," like that sentence should be canceled immediately. Like immediately. Like any single sentence that starts out with "at least," it's like, oh no, shut up now, quit while you're ahead, do not continue, do not continue, do not. It's not too late to turn around, but you are about to go to this place that your foot will be so far in your mouth. We should put ketchup on it. There is nothing that you will be able to do once you say that dumb thing after that. But what's interesting also, Avi, are you all right?
No. I'm just cracking up at Connie's mom.
Mama, I told you not to troll me. That is almost trolling. Everyone read what my brother wrote in the.
I'm sorry.
The lady who asked the most about you is not dead. Oh my God.
May she rest in peace.
I'm sorry. I literally.
Is she always like this? Does she want a friend? Because I will be her friend.
I think
She's very lonely.
I think people should request for your mom to always be a spectator for their life.
Okay, Connie, I'm just letting you know. Next time, we're just bringing on your mom. Like,
take me off and put her on just for my own comedic relief. I literally have tears in my eyes from laughing.
No, I don't want to call her right now.
It's too soon.
Okay, wait. I actually had a question before this started, and I bet I couldn't stop. My question is, Connie, seriously, because I've done this and I admit to it, and because even though I do this within my own community. Okay, here we go. Okay, I'm gonna have to block her.
When she says
oh, great, it's a safe space. It's a safe space.
She says sexy nightgown. It's like probably from when we were children. She borrowed one of ours, like our old like.
Oh, so like Hello Kitty. Very 90s.
Okay. Refocus. Okay, Sarah or Sarah?
Sarah or Sarah, whichever.
Okay, Sarah, we're asking you, please play nice. Like, we have makeup on. Like, we can't like keep doing this. It's like not really gonna work. So let us get at the end. You could bring it at the end. Let us.
Yeah.
We need like another 20 minutes, and then like you could totally bring it at the end. Give us 20 more minutes. Okay, Connie, what like being that? Yeah. Be like I've made mistakes. I admit to making mistakes. I've said things that I wanted to like shove it right back into my mouth faster than it came out. What do we say instead of saying the singles, the single people, the singles in the community? Like, obviously we're not saying the girls and the boys. What do you want us to say?
So I think like someone had written earlier that they don't mind being called a girl, which I hear. Like some people it doesn't bother them, but I think for a lot of people it's just a reminder of how they're being treated. So it's less about also what you're saying, but the emotion behind it. So if you're not respecting us as adults, if you're not treating us as adults, being called those labels hurts that much more. I think if we were getting the respect that we should be getting as adults and people talking to us as other than our singlehood, it would hurt less and it wouldn't matter as much. And I think coming from someone who actually is respecting us and talking to us respectfully and asking us, you know, what we're up to other than like, are you dating anyone? It like the way they speak to us will come out respectfully and it won't hurt as much.
100%.
So you think it's more about the general gestalt? Like it's fine if somebody is generally speaking, like if they're saying it once or twice, as long as sort of it's the general respect overall about what you're dealing with, what people are going through. It's that concern and validation and sensitivity. So the label itself is important, but not as important as everything else. Is that effectively what you're saying?
The context matters.
Yeah,
but the relationship context matters.
Yeah, it's like the straw at the end of it all. Like it's just like, you know, the accumulation of everything. I mean, I could start listing it off, but you know, people feel very alone when they're single. They feel very forgotten. They get set up by people, and the people who do set them up often don't listen to feedback, you know, don't respect their no. I was speaking about that earlier, right? They'll, you know, oh, you should try again. You should try again because I said so, not because you are an adult with your own opinion and your own gut. People often don't set us up at all. People don't invite us to Shabbos meals when they're inviting lots of other couples in the community, but they would never think to invite a single person. Or what else? I mean, there's so much more.
But jumping on that, Connie, what you just said made me realize something. I think there's a difference when someone asks you a question. There's a difference between them asking a question because they care or because they're curious.
100%.
And so if you feel like you're often getting asked questions just because people are curious versus when it's coming from a place where like you really feel like they care, then that can make all the difference in what that interaction feels like.
100%. And before I forget, there's something that I wanted to bring up that I just don't want to forget to say. I've spoken a lot about, you know, people are like, oh, how, like, it's really hard to set single people up because part of feeling really lonely is A, not being adults, but B, most of us probably wanting to get married and feeling like it's really hard to in our community because we don't have many opportunities to meet people on our own. And then feeling that a lot of times, unless we're like really out there and well known, and even then we're not getting set up much and it's really lonely in that way. And I empathize with people who say that it's hard to set people up sometimes. Like, it's sometimes a natural talent. There are people who aren't official matchmakers and are just really good at like successfully thinking of who to put with who. And like, I sometimes think personally, I really haven't set many people up. And not that I know that many like guys to match up with girls, but I don't think I necessarily have that intuitive talent. But I have to say over the years, like there have been people who haven't necessarily set me up, but have tried in other ways. Whether it's, I have a friend who specifically invited me for Shabbos and 2 other single friends, and had her husband just ask like 2 or 3 single guys in the community, and they just tried, and no one went on a date after that. But this was like 3 years ago, I don't know, and I still think about it because it wasn't even one of like my closest friends, but it was just so thoughtful and it was such an effort. And so many people don't even just try in another way, and that makes you really feel less lonely throughout the whole thing, even if nothing successful as far as dating comes out of it. I think that's really important and people don't realize.
You know, it's funny, you actually made me think of something else, how there's this whole pandemic of couples not inviting divorced men or women over, more specifically women, because they're afraid that they're gonna, hit on their husbands, or I don't know, they're gonna be inappropriate. And it's so, besides the fact that it's disgusting, but it's so upsetting. And because they're divorced, do you think they're out gonna prostitute themselves in front of your husband? Like, ew. And it's such a shame because these women and men are stuck home, sometimes with children, and they're used to, when they were married, they might have hosted, like we hosted tons before I got divorced. And all of a sudden it was like crickets. And I lived in Crown Heights at the time. I remember my son was small. There was no Eruv. So I was home alone with my baby every Shabbos because where was I going to go? Couldn't go anywhere with a stroller. I couldn't carry him. And, the only way to really go out is to sleep out or go to someone, by the time my son he was walking, he was 2 or 3. But just the thought of it, like, it's so gross. And it's so upsetting that it's something that is even looked at in a perverted way. That just made me think of that, honey. And I mean, I see it here as well. I see, my friends have said stuff. My clients have said things. And it's like, yeah, I never get invited out because, what I'm like, it's really upsetting.
Right. It's that communal integration piece. And I think that the pandemic has really highlighted a lot of aspects of community that we need to work on, especially for those who already felt isolated even before the pandemic, and just kind of, we had a lot more time to really sit and dig deep and be like, what does this all mean for us? So as we're starting to wind down, I'm wondering if you guys could share a little bit about, what do you wish, like, you have an audience right now, and this audience is also going to be talking to other people about what they hear, right? So we really have the ability to hopefully create some ripple effects. What do you wish the community knew more of or was more really sensitive to in terms of understanding? Like, what are some of the big misunderstandings that you think people need to kind of look at and be more mindful of?
Well, I think, speaking for the divorced world, it's not always a tragedy when someone gets divorced. Sometimes it's a mazel tov, and they're not always these nebuch cases. On the contrary, they're these strong people who knew that they were in a bad situation, wherever that might be, being financially abused, sexually abused, emotionally abused. They weren't a good match. They grew apart, whatever it is. It doesn't need to be a tragedy. It can be an amazing thing that they deserve a mazel tov for. But now they're able to move on in their lives and find the person they're meant to be with. So I think that's the biggest thing that I want to get across.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the question is, when you hear someone gets divorced, let's say, like, if you hear it and then you happen to run into them, you see them, whatever it is, what's then the appropriate response? Like you don't know whether it was good or bad. You're not like, hey,
you don't have to have diarrhea of the mouth every time you see somebody. Just say, hi, how are you? If they bring it up, validate, acknowledge, and move on. I think a big problem within our community in general is feeling the need to comment on everything. It's not our place. There's no reason to say anything to them. Hi, how are you? How are the kids? They say, oh, I got divorced. Oh, I don't know if I should say mazel tov or I'm sorry. Like, you can make a joke out of it and kind of lead by their body language and how they feel and how they think and whatever. But I think the whole thing with having to say something just because something happened in someone's life, I don't think that we need to comment on everything.
It's such a great point. And I listened to a podcast recently by David Bashevkin where he was talking to Josh Grayjour, who was talking about loss and how people relate to loss in the community when somebody, you know, he lost his wife. And he said something that really I thought was important. He was saying that people need to not assume that they know what somebody is feeling. So in other words, like sending a text message that says, you know, an arrogant, like, I assume that this is really hard for you right now because of X or Y. Right? Which, like, maybe it wasn't hard, right? Like, meaning maybe in that moment the person was doing okay, right? And not to assume that we know how someone feels about their own situation. So even what you're saying is that when people are right away giving pity to someone who just got divorced, right? They're assuming that the person is, let's say, really feeling that way also, when maybe you're saying the person might feel like they just did something really brave. And right.
It took a lot for them to get there. You know, it's not easy. You know, I have tons of clients who have come to me after years of therapy to be strong enough to leave their spouses,
right,
or wives. And I've seen it on both men and women. And I give those people a lot of credit. It's not easy. It's really not. And the fact that they got the balls to do it and felt strong in that, in their decision, and really went all the way, went through it and fought, whether it be for custody, whether it be just showing up for their get. It's an amazing thing. And it's sometimes the highest form of self-care. You know, we see someone jogging, we're not like, oh, I'm so sorry you have to jog and lose weight. Like, we don't say that. We might say, okay, great job, you're jogging, but we're not going to say like, you know?
Right.
I just have to like bring out two of these comments that are here because they're amazing. Being divorced is like, Luke, I have brown eyes. Like, it's just a detail about me, just a detail. And I know, Connie, you would definitively say the same thing about the single community. But the other thing, someone else said, there's no need to acknowledge it. It's the divorce equivalent of Emir Sashem by you, soon by you. And I think that those are exactly what you're saying. Yeah. Exactly.
Saying it better than I could have. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Connie, yeah.
I think
that we need
to realize we don't always need to say everything we think and have a little bit of a filter. Coming from someone who has no filter.
Connie, was there anything you wanted to kind of close with in terms of the community of, you know, especially going into Rosh Hashanah, where we hope that Shul will be, you know, busier and have more people who, you know, who haven't been there in a while. What do you feel like people can perhaps keep in mind from a communal standpoint regarding what we addressed tonight?
I think kind of piggybacking a little bit off of what Yael was sharing about how it, you know, our marriage status is not all of us, and we're so much more than that. I've met so many amazing single people on this app who, many of them are successful. They live productive, happy lives, happy, emphasis on the happy. And I think from a community perspective, a lot of us feel that, you know, people look pitting at us, they feel bad for us, and they shouldn't. And if they can just separate the communal desire for people to get married from our day-to-day lives, which is that we're living successful lives and often happy lives, despite the fact that we're single, and kind of acknowledge that by their actions, by speaking to us about things other than who we're dating. And if they do have a thought about someone for us, then they can bring it up constructively, right? If there's actually a constructive action, like I actually thought of someone for you, then I'm going to bring it up to you. But not just because I'm just a yenta and I want to know a year since I saw you if there's anything new other than the white hairs popping up on your uncovered head. So, and speaking of that, someone actually brought a point here that I think is important to highlight, because I don't know that the general community at large acknowledges that. Someone mentioned here about not having follow through after people recommend an idea. And I think that that is very, very upsetting for single people, at least for most single people, and makes us feel even more forgotten, that often people sometimes think of an idea, but never let you know what happened. So you feel even more forgotten, and it's almost more hurtful than if no one would have told you to begin with an idea. And I think people kind of mistakenly think that if they call us back and they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, like he wasn't interested because X, Y, and Z, that we're going to be hurt. And it's actually usually not the case. We're usually just, we didn't like start planning our life together with this guy based off his grainy bathroom photo, you know? Like we just as adults, we have like, we're taking care of our lives independently.
Oh, well, Connie, isn't it a picture from the sister's wedding from 10 years ago?
Actually, sometimes you're not sure if it's like his wedding and he cut out, like you never know. Especially Jay's wife. Questionable photos on there. Possibly married. But,
no joke.
But we are not going to share about the photos that we discussed in our planning meeting for this. No.
By the way, guys, I thought of you yesterday as I was dealing with a patient. I was like, if only these ladies would see what I'm doing.
Connie, we're live right now. I'm just reminding you, we are live.
I mean, something I haven't said on live before.
We are live, but I would also add to that is, you know, something that I think is worth kind of thinking about is even just this whole concept of the whipping the head around when someone walks into shul, right? Like just that gesture, right? And I think it's there's an aspect of it that's human nature, but I also think that it's learned and it's cultural. And it doesn't have to happen in that moment, right? It doesn't have to happen. And I think the other piece is that I think sometimes people really underestimate what it means to just look someone in the eye and say, it's really good to see you.
Yes.
I'm really happy to see you. I'm really happy to see you. And I love that I can hug you now. You know, like the whole, like, what's the script? What should we say? Not say, right? Like just especially, like, we've had a lot of loss in our community over the last year and a half. We've had a lot of young people that got sick. We had a lot of, you know, talk about like we say in Asana Tokef about like Magefa. Like we have a new understanding and appreciation of what that means and untimely death and health issues. And I think even just what it means to see people and just like really valuing that we could see them. And it doesn't have to be catch me up on your life, right? But really just genuinely happy to see them and to say that, like, I'm really happy to see you. This is so wonderful.
I love that we all use the same accent for the yenta. I understand.
Well, there's, I mean, I think it's safe to say that there's a prototype. I think it's safe to say there's a prototype.
That statement.
And I think that there's like enough of them that we're not talking about one specific person.
Oh, absolutely. Accurate,
if you think we're talking about you, it's definitely worth self-reflecting, but we're not talking specifically about you. Yeah.
Connie's mom, you're welcome to jump in at any point now. We're totally fine with that.
Oh,
okay.
I mean, I was sad when she.
I have 2 comments here in the question box that I'm just gonna put up here. Let's see if I can figure out how to do that. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, so 3, my girl. She always has good questions.
Okay, so what about when people say your biological clock is ticking? Super annoying. Yeah, it's another one of these things, right? Connie, yeah.
No shit.
Yeah, I mean, tell them F you. I don't know what to say. Ask them how their biological clock is doing.
Are you overworking? Are you ovulating on
You'd be like, you're like, I saw
you going to the mikvah?
You're like, I saw a commercial. I saw a commercial for Hair Club for Men. Maybe you want to see if is that still around?
Are you having hot flashes yet? Because it kind of looks like, yeah, okay, yeah.
How's your biological clock? Or do you look at your watch and be like, oh shoot, I'm so late.
By the way, now that
1 second, I gotta go get a Tavika cloth. Excuse me. Hold on, I'm perimenopause. What the hell?
My friends are trolling me in the comments.
Yeah, so on that note, do you have a tampon? I love it.
Yeah,
I love it. Okay, one more. Here's another one. Are you going to address childbearing in the singles and divorce community? I mean, go ahead. Who wants to take this?
But it's an issue because number one, first of all, I've had clients who are pregnant, super hard, super stressful because there's the question about the delivery room. When is the father or the mother, I mean, the mother sees the baby. Obviously, she's, you know, we all know anatomy. But when is the father going to see the baby? What should the mother do? What are her rights to have privacy when she gives birth? It's a really contentious and stressful time for a pregnant woman to go through a divorce. It's hell. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I think they are some of the strongest people in the world for doing that. It's amazing. But the other thing that is a big issue is there are a lot of women who are divorced who might have only 1 or 2 or 3 children. And they dreamt of big families, and they're divorced, and they've been divorced for years and years and years, and they don't know when they're going to have another baby. And then by the time they get remarried, you know, they can't have a kid for whatever reason. And it's very hard. I myself am going through that, you know. I mean, I was single for 2 years from my divorce to when I got remarried. And infertility has been a very big issue in my life, clearly. Discussed it many times. But yeah, it's a really big problem, and it's been following me for many, many years. But it can be very devastating also for men, because, you know, they also dreamt of all these kids and living with their children and not having their kids as much as they thought they would. And by the time they get remarried, if they get remarried, you know, their wives, if they haven't frozen their eggs or done any of the more modern medicine type things, and other interventions don't work, it could be really soul crushing for them and their dreams and their. That's what I have to say.
Absolutely. Connie, I know, you know, we discussed before this idea, and meaning I was supposed to have a baby. We've discussed on the page this idea of being infertile, not by choice, of wanting to be able to have a family, but not being able to because certain people view that if you're single, that you only want to have a baby if you're going to have a partner. Some people choose to be single parents, other people don't. It's like we're not going to be able to deal with all of these different facets now, and I'm not going to even begin to touch it because I think it's too hard to discuss. Is there something that you want to comment on here, or should we just leave it because it's too big of a topic?
I don't want to open up. Yeah, it is a big topic, but I think just people should remember that I think they kind of just see this big stop sign for a single person that, like, you are not married, and that's all I see right now, and that's your biggest life struggle. But people forget that we are adults, and a lot of us have been single for many years, and some of us want to have a family. And yes, you can theoretically become a single parent, but for most of us in communities where that is very, very rare and not as accepted, that difficulty is not something that most of us would choose to take upon ourselves. So in addition to possibly having the pain of not finding the person to have kids with, a lot of us crave children also, even if we're not currently partnered up. And remembering that we're adults that, you know, that might want to be having kids, and that's painful for us too. So it's not just painful necessarily going to a wedding, it's painful going to the bris, to the kiddush, to the bar mitzvah of your best friend who's already on their like 5th or 6th child when you maybe are still wishing to have a first. So yeah, something to remember.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I do think also something I find for many people in terms of social media being triggering of seeing certain types of photos. I find that for many single adults, it can be difficult having birthdays in terms of time passing. Signing a new lease can be painful also. And I also find seeing people's back to school photos of their children can be triggering for people, because it's seeing how old their friends' kids are, and seeing it, you know, it's one thing to like know something and to have like a concept in your mind, but it's another thing to like see an image, to see a child, to see a person. And I will just throw in there, as I've seen clinically, and I talk about patterns, not people, so I'm not talking about any one specific person, but I find that sometimes it could be tone deaf emotionally to try to comfort someone who's not married by saying, well, can't you just freeze your eggs, as though it's some kind of like panacea. And I find that that could be very, very painful for people. And I also want to throw in there that there are many people who are single who go through egg freezing, the harvesting, that whole process could be incredibly triggering and lonely. And they feel like there's not a lot of people that they could talk to about it. Some people can't even talk to. Expensive. Some people feel like they cannot even speak to their own biological families about it, about, you know, just having that cushion. And for, you know, I do want to throw that out there because I do find that married people sometimes will talk about it as this very simple fix it and really don't understand really don't understand the just whole emotional experience of that. And that when a woman is going through that process, it doesn't, and this is not to add shame to it, because I think it's an amazing time that we're in right now with science, and we are very, very grateful for what science can offer us. And we also can recognize that there needs to be sensitivity about the way it's kind of distributed as this like wholesale advice of like, well, can't you just do that? And so I think the childbearing topic, like we said, I would say you open it up, you sew it up. That in and of itself can be a whole hour, but I think that, or many, many hours, but I think that it is important for people to recognize that the passage of time, which is a big trigger for many people who are looking for a partner, the childbearing aspect does bring a lot of other, you know, a lot of pain to that as well. And that doesn't mean that people need to apologize. It doesn't mean that people who are married with kids need to apologize for the fact that they are married with children, but at the same time understand that there are a lot of people that are really wishing and hoping that that could be their situation right now, and to be sensitive to that, to be sensitive to that. I always say, you know, being considerate does not equal being codependent. I think sometimes people get this thing in their head that if they're being considerate, then they're like, oh my God, you're being so codependent. That like you're like basing your actions on what other people might think and feel, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, you can be considerate. Like you can say, hey, you know what? Like maybe I don't need to write like a Facebook post to my 2-year-old on their birthday, since number one, Sophie cannot read and Sophie does not have Facebook. So like we're all excited, and I say this, I have 4 children, like it's very exciting when they have birthdays, but like I don't need to write their birthday post on Facebook. I could say to them directly, right?
Yes, and yes, like in like 12,000 ways. And one other just educational point, in terms of freezing eggs, when people say this concept of like, oh, you should just go and freeze your eggs, in the same way in the I was supposed to have a baby community, people say like, oh, just do IVF. As if it's simple, like as all the things that Rachel just said, like as if it's simple, as if it's not expensive, as if it's not emotionally draining and physically draining. But also both with the IVF process and with freezing your eggs, it's not a guarantee. Like it doesn't mean if you freeze your eggs, whatever that means for you, it doesn't mean that those eggs are then gonna work. Right. It doesn't mean that they're usable.
I mean, and Rachel Tuckman just wrote like the whole just adopt thing. Yeah. I mean, yes. I want to make sure that like that we're giving nuance to the egg freezing, right? That like it's something that like is an amazing development in science. At the same time, people really just need to be careful when they throw it out there as, oh, just go freeze your eggs, as though it's like just go buy milk at Target. Like no. This is not just like going to buy Target and milk. Go buy milk at Target. Yeah.
And also
we may or may not have to buy milk at Target later. Just saying.
When you don't have a partner, like just imagine going to that clinic, like, and you maybe don't have any support while you're doing that. That's like a really, really difficult process while you're looking in the mirror and getting older and you know, approaching geriatric pregnancy age, like, you know,
advanced maternal age. I hate that term. Okay, we may have 1 or 2 other questions. Here's another one, and then we're going to end in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, because I have to go get milk at Target.
Correct. Yeah, Rachel, I think they're open for a while.
I think till 12. They're open till 12.
Right. So where are you rushing?
You're right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, if a friend who is single expresses that they're jealous of your life because you're married or you have kids, how do you respond?
Don't say Mir Tashem by you.
Yeah. I mean, in general, I'm very like, I never like to express that I'm jealous of someone, but I do acknowledge that we all experience jealousy. And I think that it's very normal to look at someone who has something that we envision for ourselves and to feel jealous. I think the best way to respond in that scenario is to try to be empathetic. It may not be a great way to express it, to tell someone that you're jealous of their life, but kind of just being as empathetic as you can in that scenario. I don't know that I would personally express it in that way, but it's hard. It's hard when people are going through the different stages and you're still so behind to not experience jealousy. And I think we just need to normalize feeling that. I don't know that we should necessarily be telling people like, I'm jealous of this. For me personally, like, I experience jealousy all the time when I'm looking at younger people getting engaged and having babies, etc. And I don't necessarily feel the need to tell that specific person. I kind of just validate that feeling for myself, understand where it's coming from. Sometimes I like say out loud they should be benched and they should be healthy and whatever, just to negate whatever bad voodoo I might be sending their way. So I try to bring it a little religious spin, but I just think it's very normal to feel jealous, especially when you're stuck behind.
It's normal, but I'll also just add in there, I find that when people tell another person that they're jealous of them, and not in the way of like two friends like processing their feelings together, but like when someone tells someone that they're jealous, I find that sometimes the person who's being told that feels like they somehow need to deconstruct their life to show that person why they shouldn't be jealous of them. And so that also could put this pressure then on, you know, the person who's saying that, you know, her friend says that she's jealous of her life, like that can also put her in an uncomfortable position where she feels like she needs to try to make her friend feel better or be like, no, like you don't have to be jealous because like X and Y is going on in my life also.
My husband is a jerk and actually we're starving and have no money and whatever.
Right.
I think another thing though, if someone says it to you, because I see here, if a friend says it to you, like what should you do? I think you should acknowledge that, you know, listen, it might be hard for them and your life might be triggering for them and hard for them. And remember that and say, you know, what can I do to help? What can I do to alleviate your jealousy? What can I do? Obviously not to tear yourself down and say, my husband's a jerk and we're starving, but say, what can I do to help you? And acknowledge the fact that that's how they feel and that this is hard for them. And, you know, I think validation goes a long way.
Validation. I also think even asking him, is there anything I should be more sensitive to that I am doing or not doing that is making it better or worse?
I love that.
Right. So I think that might be helpful because let's say this person who's married with children is randomly like sends all these pictures of her kids on WhatsApp and just right. So maybe her friend who's single could be like, you know, it might be helpful to me if like you could ask first if like, oh, hey, like, do you want to see the pictures? Or like, oh, or maybe not send like 25 pictures, maybe send 5 pictures or right. Like, I think asking like, how can I want to be more sensitive to this. And I want you to feel like we're still normal friends and that I'm not like, I don't want you to feel like you're being shut out. Right. Because that also, I think it's hard for people.
Either.
Right. So I think finding that balance, but saying like, can you let me know how I can be more sensitive to that so that I'm not adding to the triggers?
Yeah, look, I think it's about a little bit of humility here, right? Like you recognize that you have something that the other person does not. You're in a different position. And it's again, like seeing people for who they are. If they're saying to you that they're jealous, then they feel comfortable with you. Like you don't say you feel jealous to someone, to a stranger. You say it to someone who you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, well, on Instagram.
Okay, fine. Right, true. But in real life.
Yeah, in real life.
Right, in real life, you're having this conversation with someone who you feel comfortable with. And so that's the opening. Like, I love that, Rachel. That's the opening to then say like, wow, yeah, I see that. Like the person's probably already knows that on some level, but now, like, what can I do? And how
or
can
just
I make
like,
it better?
I appreciate you letting me in on that. Like, I appreciate you like letting me know that, like, and how can I be more sensitive to that? And just kind of, as opposed to this, like, I need to prove to you, like, let me deflate my bubble of life for you so you won't be jealous anymore, which I don't even think that's so effective anyway, because I think people can be jealous of a person, but you could also be jealous of the idea of that person's life. So even if you try to be like, let me tell you the fine print, it's not going to change the fact that they could be jealous that you have certain things that you're up to a certain point in life that they're not up to, or that they're still waiting for and want really badly.
I love that, Rachel. I think that also would help normalize the jealousy, like the experiencing of that emotion more for people, because it's really the jealousy of the idea. Most of us are not looking to marry your husbands. No offense. Like,
We're not coming to the Shabbos meal. You're not coming to the Shabbos meal, as Yael said, ready to steal the husbands in the kitchen. That's not happening.
We'll get a little close while we wash Nagelwasser. Huh?
You're like, can you pass me another piece of challah?
Oh, right. I dropped the gefilte fish.
Bend and snap. Bend and snap.
And snap. And snap.
Okay.
Slow-mo. I love how you cut the challah so big.
Oh.
Okay. I need to zip this up. Okay.
Scotty, this always happens to us. There's there's like an after party where I'm like, Rachel, you're live. Rachel, you're live. Remember, you're live. You're live. You're live.
Still live. Okay.
Very unfiltered.
All right, guys. Let's wrap this up.
I feel like we just got this party started.
I know. Rachel always does this. She's like, I have to leave in 5 minutes, and then 45 minutes later, she's still wrapping up something she wants to wrap up.
Okay, but we already told her that Target is open till midnight, so there's no problem.
I have nothing else to do. I have nothing else to do tonight. Nothing. I mean, maybe I was going to write a Facebook post addressing my children who don't have Facebook, right? Just because like everyone else in the world needs to hear.
I don't think I knew that
it was just yesterday.
You never post them.
Yeah, I don't post my kids. I didn't
even know that.
They're not my accessories, and they can create their own social media identities. They're not. It's
Mine is all over social media, but that's because he's very into it.
Rachel, if you're doing a post for your kids, then you can just do my kids also, okay?
I'll just address all the children.
Excellent. Okay, guys, we're gonna wrap up. Okay.
Before it gets really bad, and before we feel like, oh shoot, we said this on live TV, live Instagram.
I've already passed that moment.
Wait, Amy, did Instagram save the first half, or
no?
Do you think we lost?
I don't think so. I'm gonna dig for it, but I think it's gone. And we better end before like we lose this one too. So here's what we're gonna do. For those of you who put in questions that we did not get to, it was we're not answering personal questions on here. If any, we specifically chose questions that were general enough that they would address a multitude of different types of communities that we wanted to hit on here. So I just wanted to give that disclaimer. Yael, Rachel, Chani, I don't think I've laughed so hard in like a really long time. But in the midst of
Amy,
the laughter,
you gotta get out more.
Look, that's clear.
That's true too.
This live was not about me, so I'm just reminding you. We talked about some really serious stuff, and I think we hit some really deep and important topics in the overall community at large. So I'm deeply thankful to the three of you for doing this, for coming on here, for giving up your time both before and now. And look, all of you out there, we see you, we hear you, and we're trying with this little thing here that we did, we're trying to make it a little bit better. But please give us feedback, message us, talk to us, tell us how we can do better so that we can tell it to our communities, because we are all here to help all of you. That is the reason why we do this work. All of us, we do this because we care about all of you and we want to make it better. So last words. Now we're in the after party. Last words. I'm giving everybody one laugh. Go. One joke. Go.
Oh, we're making it funny?
I can't make it.
Whatever.
Oh, on the spot.
Can I just say thank you also? Thank you so much for giving us a platform. I think it's really beautiful what Instagram has been able to create, like a sense of community for those who maybe don't feel like they're part of the community. So thank you, Amy, for creating the series and for inviting me and for allowing me to maybe give a little bit of voice to the single experience. And thank you, Rachel, for being a longtime advocate of single rights. and thank you for
my side.
Really, you've, I think, really, your empathy and your ability to very, very well articulate our experience and understand it has been so eye-opening for me in interacting with you and becoming friends with you, but also just having you on my platform. And I think it's been very helpful to many single people too. So thank you from all of us.
Yay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Al.
Okay, Gal, you can make a joke now.
I can't make jokes on the spot.
I can't either.
I could always be inappropriate. I'm like an old man, but
Do you want to talk about J Swipe just to like get us out of here?
I don't know anything about J Swipe. I think it came after my time.
You want me to talk about J Swipe? It's gonna get depressing.
All right. No. All right, we're good. We're good. Rachel, tie it up in a bow for us.
I'll tie it up by saying that I think that people have two very strong yearnings. People want to feel normal, but they also want to feel like they're exceptional, right? Because I think reassuring people, like, don't worry, like your experience is very normal. So on the one hand, that can help and be comforting, but on the other hand, somewhere deep down, many people feel like, yeah, but I'm supposed to be exceptional. I'm supposed to buck the system. I'm supposed to be kind of above and beyond. And I think one of the ways that we could be more compassionate towards ourselves is making space for whatever our experience might be, whatever emotions might be coming up for us. And I once heard an acronym for shame. That shame stands for should have already mastered everything.
Nice.
Yeah, isn't that, I don't know who said it. I didn't make it up, but it really stuck with me because it really, I thought it was really beautiful. And I think that people experience shame. I think people experience shame in a number of areas of their lives. I think our community has work to do around the shame that many people feel and the shame that is sometimes projected on people who do not have a partner, or even just anyone who doesn't fit the mold, right? And that's what we were talking about, which got cut off in the first half, but we were talking about that feeling of when you walk into shul and you feel like people turn around and they look at you and they're thinking, they're looking at what you're wearing and they're thinking about your, and they may or may not be thinking that, but those insecurities, come up for people of just this sense of, do I fit in my relationship status, in my political affiliations, my sexual orientation, like all these things about people. And I think that going back to the idea of like, what does it mean to see someone and really just be happy to see them, right? And then we don't have to have this beautiful, perfect, like, this is what you should say and blah, 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 but just like to be human and to be empathetic and to just simplify it a little bit of just like, what does it mean to just bump into someone else and be like, hey, what's up?
Yes. Okay. Yes, and yes. So all of us, your marching orders are just say hi to people, look them in the eye, say hello, and say how much you genuinely miss them and are so glad to see them, and then move on, Those are your marching orders. This lecture was not done on Zoom. This was only done here on Instagram. So we do not have the first part. I think I will look for it. I believe we will only have the second part, God willing. And we will.
Amir Tashem by you.
Amir Tashem by me, and I hope I look good. So, and on that,
Emiyat Hashem. Emiyat Hashem. If Hashem wants the Instagram live to be saved, it will be saved. If it's not, it's not. You know.
If it's not your time, it's not your time.
Not your time.
Okay, we're done.
We're done.
Good night.
Okay,
You're like, goodbye, goodbye, everyone. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everybody. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye. Thank you.